Chapter 1. The Bonding Ceremony. The ancient scent of burning sage and ceremonial incense filled the grand ceremonial lodge, mixing with the unmistakable musk of werewolves in their human forms. I hugged the rough stone wall, trying to disappear into the crowd of excited bodies surrounding me. The lunar bonding happened only twice each year, when the moon reached its peak brightness during the spring and autumn equinoxes. It was the most sacred gathering for our kind, a celebration where unmated wolves discovered their destined partners, forging bonds that would strengthen bloodlines and create alliances between territories. I shouldn't have been here. Not someone like me. My hand moved instinctively to the delicate copper bracelet hidden beneath my plain brown dress, my grandmother's final gift before she passed. A sun and moon design with intricate etchings that told the story of her human ancestry. "Never forget your true nature," she had whispered as she clasped it around my wrist years ago. Neither purely one nor the other, but something extraordinary. I had learned to conceal it well, just as I had learned to hide everything else about myself. The bracelet felt warm against my skin, a constant reminder of the secret flowing through my veins. Half wolf, half human. A hybrid that most pure-blooded werewolves would rather banish from their lands than welcome into their sacred ceremonies. My wolf was smaller, my instincts muted, my standing in the pack hierarchy completely non-existent. Yet here I was, brought along as a companion to Sophia, the daughter of our territory's second-in-command, because no one else could assist her in preparing for the night she might find her bonded mate. "Keep to the edges, Maya," Sophia had instructed me earlier while I helped her into her ceremonial gown. "Don't attract notice. Just be available when I need you." She wasn't malicious, really, just pragmatic. A half-blood at the bonding ceremony was like bringing a house cat to a lion's den, an anomaly that could cause embarrassment. I watched as the lodge filled with members from 6 different territories. Their social rankings were obvious in their seating arrangements. Alphas and their families occupied the elevated platform at the far end of the massive space. Second-tier families and their descendants filled the front sections, while warriors and guardians took the middle rows. Those of lower status, the healers, craftspeople, and others without prestigious bloodlines, claimed whatever spaces remained toward the back. Where did someone like me belong? Nowhere. Everywhere. I was a shadow drifting through their world. The ceremonial drums started their ancient rhythm, a primal beat that seemed to awaken something deep within me. Even my diluted wolf blood responded to the sound. I felt the weak creature inside me stir, reaching toward the music like a flower turning toward sunlight. The ceremony was beginning. "Maya," Sophia's sharp whisper cut through the noise. She gestured frantically from several rows ahead. "I need refreshment. Quickly." I nodded and slipped away, grateful for the excuse to move. The ceremonial lodge was constructed as an enormous circular space with curved wooden benches arranged in a crescent facing the platform where the alphas sat. Behind the seating, long tables laden with food and drink lined the walls, prepared for the celebration feast that would follow the formal rituals. As I reached for an ornate chalice to fill with spring water, I felt the energy in the lodge shift dramatically. The drumming grew more intense, and a reverent hush fell over the assembled crowd. I turned to see what had caused the change and nearly dropped the chalice. The Western Mountain Pack had arrived. Unlike the other 5 territories already gathered, the Western Mountain Pack rarely participated in interterritorial ceremonies. They lived in the harshest, most isolated regions and whispered stories about their fierce nature and incredible strength spread like wildfire among the other packs. Their alpha leader was rumored to be the most formidable werewolf alive, a true apex predator who had claimed his position by defeating 3 challengers in a single night. No one knew his exact age or the full scope of his abilities, only that he had never chosen a mate despite being in his prime. And now he was here, standing at the entrance with his entourage. Even in human form, his dominance was unmistakable. Tall and commanding, with shoulders that seemed to fill the doorway, he surveyed the room with eyes so intensely green they appeared to glow in the torchlight. His black hair was longer than the fashion in our territories, falling to his shoulders in a way that seemed both untamed and noble. But it was the distinctive marking that captured everyone's attention. A ritualistic scar that curved from his left temple to his cheekbone, pale against his bronze skin, a battle mark he wore like a badge of honor. The entire lodge had fallen silent, and I realized I had been staring far too long. I quickly filled the chalice and turned to return to Sophia. But in my haste, I took a wrong path. Instead of heading back toward the middle sections where she waited, I found myself walking along the empty seats reserved for the highest-ranking visitors. Seats that would now be filled by the Western Mountain Pack. "Pardon me," I murmured, trying to correct my direction, but it was too late. The Western Alpha and his entourage had begun filing into the reserved area, and suddenly I was caught in their procession, the chalice of water still clutched in my hands. I pressed myself against the wall, hoping to become invisible as they passed. One by one, imposing figures in dark leather and silver jewelry walked by, their eyes sliding over me as if I were nothing more than a shadow. I might have escaped notice entirely if not for what happened next. The Alpha leader stopped directly beside me. His steps faltered. His head turned slowly, nostrils flaring slightly as he drew in my scent. I knew what he was doing, testing the air, analyzing me. Horror washed over me in an icy wave. My scent, my half-wolf, half-human scent that I tried desperately to mask with herbal baths and special oils. Could he detect it? Would he expose me here, in front of everyone? His piercing green eyes locked onto mine, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, he studied me with an intensity that made my knees weak. Then, to my absolute shock, he moved. Not away from me in disgust as I had expected, but toward the empty space directly beside me. "Here," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through my very core. His second in command, a stern-looking man with angular features, leaned forward. "My Alpha, those aren't your designated seats. The leaders sit at the—" I said here. The words weren't spoken loudly, but they carried such absolute authority that the man immediately fell silent. And so, with my heart threatening to burst from my chest, I found myself standing beside the most feared and powerful Alpha in all the territories as he claimed the bench directly next to where I had been pressed against the wall. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the space beside him. I looked desperately toward Sophia, who was staring at me with wide, horrified eyes from across the lodge. The chalice in my hands trembled, water threatening to spill over the rim. "I can't," I whispered. "I'm just a companion. I need to return to my—" "Sit," he repeated. And this time there was something in his voice that bypassed all rational thought, speaking directly to the wolf inside me. My legs folded beneath me before I could even process what was happening. And suddenly I was seated beside the Alpha leader of the Western Mountain Pack, aware of hundreds of shocked and confused eyes upon us. The ceremonial drums stumbled for a moment before resuming their rhythm. Whispers erupted throughout the lodge like the hissing of serpents. Even his own pack members exchanged bewildered glances. "Your name," he said, not looking at me but straight ahead as the ceremony began to recover from the disruption he had caused. "Maya," I answered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. "Maya," he repeated, as if testing how my name felt on his tongue. Then, so quietly that I almost missed it. "You smell of starlight and hidden truths." Chapter 2. The Alpha's Interest. The elder presiding over the ceremony had begun to speak, his voice rising above the drums as he welcomed the 6 territories and explained the sacred traditions of the lunar bonding. But I could focus on nothing except the heat radiating from the Alpha beside me and the terrifying possibility that he had recognized what I was. For the next hour, I sat rigid beside him, clutching the now warm chalice of water that Sophia would never receive, barely breathing as the ceremonial rituals unfolded. Eligible wolves were called forward according to their rank to present themselves before potential mates. Traditional dances were performed. Ancient vows were recited. And throughout it all, the Alpha leader remained beside me, his massive presence both terrifying and somehow magnetic. I could feel the stares, hear the whispers. Who was this unremarkable girl with the auburn hair seated beside the Western Alpha? Was she significant? Was she being disciplined? Was this some sort of political maneuver? When the first portion of the ceremony concluded and people began to rise for the feast portion, I saw my opportunity to escape. "I must go," I whispered, finally setting down the chalice and preparing to stand. "My lady needs me." His hand shot out, closing around my wrist with surprising gentleness despite the obvious strength I could feel contained within his grip. "Your lady." His green eyes narrowed slightly. "I serve as companion to Sophia, daughter of Commander Thaddeus of the Northern Valley Territory," I explained, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. A smile curved his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. Not anymore. Before I could ask what he meant, he stood, pulling me to my feet beside him. His towering height made me feel even smaller than my already modest stature. With his hand still wrapped around my wrist, he turned to face the startled faces of his pack members. "This one," he announced, his voice carrying despite its measured tone, "will attend me during our stay." His second-in-command's face contorted in shock. "My Alpha, we brought your usual attendants. There's no need to. Are you questioning me, Kane?" The temperature of his voice seemed to drop several degrees. The man named Kane immediately lowered his eyes. "No, my Alpha." The Alpha turned his piercing gaze back to me, and there was something in his eyes that sent a shiver down my spine, not entirely from fear. "You will attend me at the feast," he said. And though it was clearly a command, there was a strange note in his voice, almost like curiosity. As he led me toward the feasting tables, I caught a glimpse of Sophia's face, pale with shock and something that looked uncomfortably like fury. I had no idea what to do, how to explain, or even what was happening. The only thing I knew with certainty was that somehow, impossibly, the most powerful Alpha in all the territories had singled me out, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew exactly what I was hiding. The feast hall buzzed with tension, hundreds of eyes tracking our movement as the Alpha leader led me between the long tables. My legs felt like liquid beneath me, and I struggled to match his purposeful stride. The hand around my wrist was both a brand and an anchor, preventing me from fleeing while marking me with unwanted attention. "My Alpha," a voice called out, and the crowd parted to reveal the elder who had officiated the ceremony. His weathered face was carefully composed, but I could see concern flickering in his eyes. "We've prepared the traditional seat of honor for you at the leader's table." The Western Alpha stopped, his thumb absently brushing against my pulse point in a gesture that sent an inexplicable shiver through me. I wondered if he could feel my heart racing beneath his touch. "I prefer to observe before I engage," he replied, his deep voice resonating through the suddenly quiet hall. "Prepare a table apart for two." The elder's eyes flicked to me, then back to the Alpha, confusion evident. "As you wish," he conceded with a slight bow. Within moments, attendants scrambled to set up a small table on a slightly raised platform at the side of the hall. It offered a perfect vantage point to survey the entire gathering while remaining separate from it. Precisely what a predator would choose, I thought with growing unease. As we approached the table, I finally gathered the courage to speak. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered, just loud enough for his enhanced hearing to catch. He didn't answer immediately, guiding me to a chair that an attendant held out. Only after we were both seated, with platters of roasted venison and honeyed bread being placed before us, did he lean slightly toward me. "You ask dangerous questions for someone with secrets in her blood," he murmured, reaching for a goblet of deep red wine. Ice flooded my veins. "I don't know what you mean," I lied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. His lips curved in the barest hint of a smile. "Your heart beats faster when you lie. Another tell to add to your collection." He took a sip of wine, those unnerving green eyes never leaving my face. "Eat. You'll need your strength." "For what?" I asked, even as I hesitantly reached for a piece of bread. "For surviving the night," he replied simply, as if commenting on the weather rather than making what sounded disturbingly like a threat. Across the room, I spotted Sophia, now seated with her family. Her father, Commander Thaddeus, was deep in conversation with our territory Alpha, both casting frequent glances in our direction. Sophia herself was glaring at me, her perfect features twisted with a mixture of confusion and betrayal. I couldn't blame her. I'd abandoned my duties to her, however involuntarily. "They're wondering if I've taken a sudden interest in claiming you as a mate," the Western Alpha commented, following my gaze. "It would be politically troublesome. Your commander's daughter was hoping to secure an alliance with my territory through marriage." I nearly choked on my bread. That's ridiculous. I'm just a companion." "Are you?" He tilted his head slightly, studying me with unnerving intensity. "Tell me about your grandmother." The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. My hand automatically went to the hidden bracelet beneath my dress. "She died when I was young," I said carefully. "And your father?" "A guardian from my territory. He died in a border skirmish before I was born." This at least wasn't a lie. My father had indeed been a wolf, though not the high-ranking guardian my grandmother had told everyone he was. A convenient story to explain her daughter's pregnancy after returning from a mysterious journey. The alpha seemed to consider this, taking another slow sip of wine. And yet, here you are with a scent unlike any wolf I've ever encountered. His voice dropped lower, like starlight filtered through human skin. My blood turned to ice. There it was, the acknowledgement of what I'd feared since the moment he'd paused beside me in the ceremonial lodge. He knew. "Please," I whispered, unable to keep the desperation from my voice. "If you expose me, they'll cast me out," he finished, setting down his goblet. "Or worse. The territories have always been traditional in their views on purity." Tears pricked behind my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously. Showing weakness before a predator was never wise. "If you know what I am, then why haven't you already exposed me? Why this charade?" For the first time, something like genuine emotion flickered across his scarred face, an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "Perhaps I find you intriguing." Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance of the feast hall drew our attention. A group of warriors burst in, their clothing torn and bloodied. The hall fell silent as they staggered toward the main leader's table. "Attack at the southern border." One of them gasped, loud enough for the enhanced hearing of everyone present to catch. "Rogue wolves, at least 40. They've breached the outer defenses." The feast erupted into chaos. Chapter 3. Into the darkness. Warriors leaped to their feet. Alphas began barking orders, and frightened murmurs spread through the lower-ranked wolves. The Western Alpha rose in one fluid motion, his entire demeanor shifting. The man who had been unsettling but controlled beside me transformed into something far more dangerous before my eyes. "Cain," he called, and his second-in-command materialized at his side almost instantly. "Gather our warriors." Cain nodded sharply, but hesitated, glancing at me. "And the girl?" The Alpha's hand descended to my shoulder, the weight of it both reassuring and possessive. "She stays with me." "My Alpha, with respect, a battle is no place for." "I didn't ask for your assessment, Cain." The man fell silent immediately, bowing his head in submission before disappearing into the crowd to carry out his orders. The Alpha turned to me, and I was startled by the fierce intensity that had overtaken his features. "Stay close," he commanded. "Do exactly as I say." "I should find Sophia," I protested, searching the chaotic crowd for my mistress. His grip on my shoulder tightened. "Your loyalty is misplaced. Did they ever show you the same concern?" The question struck deeper than he could know. No, they hadn't. I was tolerated, useful, but never truly one of them. Even Sophia, who had been kinder than most, saw me as little more than a convenient companion. Still, I hesitated. "I'm not a fighter. I'll only slow you down." A strange expression crossed his face. "There are different kinds of strength, little star." The nickname, referring to my dual nature, sent an odd shiver through me. "Now come." He led me through the panicking crowd with remarkable efficiency, his mere presence causing wolves to part before us. Outside, the night air was crisp with autumn's chill, and the full moon hung heavy and bright above us, partially obscured by racing clouds. Warriors from all 6 territories were assembling in the clearing before the ceremonial grounds, forming into units with remarkable speed despite having been feasting moments before. I spotted Sophia being escorted to one of the secured lodges with the other high-ranking females, and felt a pang of something like envy. At least she knew her place in all this. The Western Alpha guided me not toward the safety of the lodges, but toward a group of his own warriors who stood apart from the others. They were easy to distinguish, taller, broader, with an aura of barely contained savagery that made even the other territory warriors give them a wide berth. "My Alpha," one of them acknowledged, then frowned at the sight of me. "The female should be with the others." "She stays," the Alpha replied in a tone that brooked no argument. He turned to me. "Can you ride?" I blinked in surprise. "Yes, but..." Before I could finish, he whistled sharply. From the shadows of the nearby stables, a massive gray stallion emerged, trotting directly to him without bridle or saddle. The beast was enormous, with eyes that seemed to gleam silver in the moonlight. No ordinary horse, I realized, but one of the rare storm steeds bred specifically for alpha wolves. "This is Thunder," he said, running a hand along the horse's muscular neck. "He'll bear us both." "Both? You can't mean to take me into battle." His green eyes gleamed. "Not into battle. But I won't leave you here unprotected." "Why?" I demanded, frustration finally overcoming my fear. "Why do you care what happens to me? I'm nothing to you. Nothing to anyone here." Something dangerous flickered in his expression. "You are wrong on both counts," he said quietly. Then, before I could respond, he lifted me effortlessly and placed me on the horse's back. A moment later, he swung up behind me, his chest solid against my back, arms encircling me as he took hold of the horse's mane. The intimate position made me stiffen, unused to such close contact with anyone, let alone a male, and an alpha at that. "Relax," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "I can feel your fear, but you're not in danger from me." "Then what am I in danger from?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he called out to his warriors. "We ride for the southern ridge. The rogues will have used the valley pass. We'll intercept them before they reach the ceremonial grounds." With a squeeze of his powerful thighs, he urged the stallion forward, and we were suddenly flying through the forest, the Alpha's warriors following close behind. The cold night air whipped at my face, and I found myself instinctively leaning back into the solid warmth of the Alpha's chest. The forest blurred around us as the storm steed moved with supernatural speed, effortlessly navigating the darkened paths. Behind us, I could hear the sound of other horses and the occasional howl as some warriors chose to shift into wolf form to run alongside. "Why would rogues attack during a bonding ceremony?" I asked, having to raise my voice against the wind. "It's sacred ground." His arms tightened almost imperceptibly around me. "That's precisely why. All 6 territories gathered in one place, focused on rituals rather than defense. It's an opportunity they wouldn't miss." "But what do they want?" I felt rather than saw his grim smile. "Power, territory, females, the usual things men fight for." There was a pause before he added, "But this attack feels different. Too coordinated." We emerged from the forest onto a ridge that overlooked a narrow valley pass. The Alpha rained thunder to a halt with just the slightest pressure of his hands. Below us, in the pale moonlight, I could make out a disturbing sight. Dozens of figures moving through the pass, some in wolf form, others in human shape carrying weapons. "There," he murmured, his lips close to my ear. "Do you see how they move in formation? Rogues don't typically maintain that level of discipline." He was right. Even with my weaker half-wolf vision, I could tell these weren't the disorganized bands of outcast wolves that occasionally troubled territory borders. They moved with purpose like trained soldiers. The Alpha issued quiet commands to his men, who dispersed along the ridge with silent efficiency. Then, still holding me securely before him, he guided Thunder down a narrow path that led to a small cave set into the mountainside. "You'll wait here," he said, dismounting and then lifting me down. The casual display of strength, handling me as if I weighed nothing, was yet another reminder of the power difference between us. Alone, I couldn't keep the apprehension from my voice. His expression softened fractionally. "Thunder will guard you. He's worth 10 warriors." He ran a hand along the great horse's neck, murmuring something in a language I didn't recognize. The stallion nickered softly in response and positioned himself at the cave entrance. The Alpha turned back to me, and in the moonlight filtering through the cave entrance, his green eyes seemed to glow. "Stay here. Stay quiet. I'll return for you when it's safe." "What if you don't?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Something flashed across his face, surprise, perhaps, that I would be concerned for his safety. Then his lips curved in a smile that transformed his harsh features, making him look younger, almost boyish despite the fearsome scar. "I'm not so easy to kill, little star." He reached out, and for one breathless moment, I thought he might touch my face. Instead, his fingers found the copper chain around my neck, drawing out the hidden bracelet from beneath my dress. He studied the sun and moon design with its delicate engravings, something unreadable in his expression. "This was your grandmother's," he said. Not a question. I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. His thumb brushed over the engravings. "Keep it close. Remember who you are." Then, so quietly I almost missed it, "There is power in being both rather than one or the other." Before I could respond to this cryptic statement, he released the bracelet and stepped back, his expression once again becoming the impassive mask of the Alpha leader. "I'll return soon. Trust no one else who comes." With that warning, he was gone, disappearing into the darkness beyond the cave entrance with predatory silence. Thunder shifted his position, effectively blocking most of the opening, his massive body providing both protection and warmth against the night's chill. I sank down against the cave wall, drawing my knees to my chest. The events of the evening swirled in my mind like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. How had I gone from being an invisible companion to sitting in a cave under the protection of the Western Alpha leader? And more importantly, what did he want from me? He knew my secret. That much was clear. Yet instead of exposing me, he had claimed me as his attendant, separated me from my territory, and now hidden me away during an attack. None of it made sense. Unless, a chilling thought occurred to me. What if he needed something that only a half-wolf could provide? There were old stories, dark tales of blood magic that required mixed heritage. Was that why he had singled me out? Was I to be a sacrifice of some kind? The distant sounds of battle echoed from the valley below, and I clutched my grandmother's bracelet, drawing comfort from its familiar weight. Chapter 4, Revelations in the Dark. Remember who you are, she had told me. Neither purely one nor the other, but something extraordinary. The Alpha's words echoed her sentiment. There is power in being both rather than one or the other. But what kind of power? And at what cost? Time passed with agonizing slowness in the cave. I strained to hear the battle sounds, but they had faded to distant echoes, leaving me with nothing but my racing thoughts and the reassuring presence of thunder standing guard. The massive storm steed remained utterly vigilant, his ears constantly swiveling to track sounds I couldn't detect. I found myself tracing the engravings on my grandmother's bracelet, remembering how she would sit beside me at night, telling stories of her human village where people lived without the complications of pack hierarchy and wolf politics. They have their own kinds of strength, she would say, her voice wistful. Humans build, create, imagine. They don't need fangs or claws to change the world. As a child, I'd been ashamed of my human half. It made me weaker, slower, less than the pure-blooded wolf children who sensed my difference and excluded me from their games. But my grandmother had insisted it was a gift. You see with both eyes, she would tell me cryptically. One day that vision will matter. A sudden shift in Thunder's posture snapped me from my memories. The great horse's ears pricked forward, and a low rumble emanated from his chest. Someone was approaching. I pressed deeper into the shadows of the cave, heart hammering. The Alpha had warned me to trust no one else who came. What if it was rogues? Or worse, someone from my own territory who would recognize what I was? Thunder relaxed slightly, which I took as a good sign. A moment later, a familiar imposing silhouette filled the cave entrance. The Western Alpha ducked inside, his presence immediately filling the small space. Even in the dim light, I could see dark splashes on his clothing that I knew instinctively were blood. "Are you hurt?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked almost surprised by my concern. "No, the blood isn't mine." His green eyes assessed me carefully. "You're unharmed." I nodded, rising to my feet. "I heard fighting. Is it over?" His expression darkened. It was a diversion. The main force attacked the ceremonial grounds from the north while we pursued this group. Fear clutched at my heart. The others? Sophia. The ceremonial grounds were defended successfully, he cut in. But there were casualties, and several females were taken. Taken. The word came out as barely more than a whisper. The Alpha's jaw tightened. Rogues sometimes steal females, especially during bonding ceremonies. It's an old barbaric practice. We have to help them, I said, moving toward the cave entrance. An unexpected protective instinct surged through me. I might not have been fully accepted by the territory, but I had grown up with these wolves. The thought of any of them in the hands of rogues was unbearable. The Alpha caught my arm. "You're not going anywhere near rogue territory. I didn't protect you only to deliver you into greater danger," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I stared up at him, confusion and frustration warring inside me. "Why are you protecting me at all? You still haven't explained why you singled me out, why you're keeping my secret. What do you want from me?" For a long moment he was silent, studying my face with those unnerving green eyes. Then, with a sigh that seemed to come from some deep, weary place inside him, he released my arm. "Walk with me," he said, gesturing toward the cave entrance. Thunder moved aside to let us pass, and the Alpha led me along a narrow path that wound up the ridge, away from the direction of the battle. The full moon illuminated the forested landscape below us, casting everything in silver and shadow. In the distance, I could see smoke rising from what I assumed was the ceremonial grounds. 25 years ago, the Alpha began, his deep voice oddly quiet against the night air. A Western female left our territory without permission. She was not high-ranking, but she was special, She could sense things before they happened, small things usually, where the best hunting would be, when the weather would change, which pairings would produce the strongest cubs. My steps faltered slightly. He continued walking, forcing me to keep pace. She was gone for nearly 2 years, he continued. When she returned, she was different, quieter. Her gift had changed too, stronger in some ways, absent in others. The territory elders questioned her extensively about where she had been. What did she tell them? I asked, though a cold certainty was beginning to form in my chest. His eyes met mine. That she had spent time among humans. That she had fallen in love with one. That she had borne a child who she left with that human, knowing the Western Territory would never accept a half-blood. My breath caught in my throat. You think I'm that child? I know you are. There was absolute certainty in his voice. Your scent carries echoes of Western Territory, of mountain pine and highland snow. And beneath that, he leaned closer, inhaling deeply near my neck, making me shiver. The unmistakable scent of Lyra's bloodline. Lyra, a name I'd never heard before, yet it resonated within me like a bell being struck. My grandmother told me her name was Eleanor, I whispered. A human name she adopted during her time away, he confirmed. But she was born Lyra of the Silver Moon bloodline, distant cousin to the Western royal line. I stopped walking, my mind reeling with implications. If what you're saying is true, then why did she end up with the Northern Valley Territory? Why did she claim my mother's father was a guardian who died? The Alpha's expression hardened. Because she was fleeing from me. Cold fear trickled down my spine at his words. From you? Why? Not for the reasons you're imagining, he said, reading my expression easily. I was not Alpha then. My father was, and he was obsessed with Lyra's gift. When she returned, changed, he became convinced that her child, you, would possess unique abilities that could strengthen our territory. He wanted to find you, take you from your human father. And my grandmother fled to protect me. I finished, the pieces falling into horrible place. He nodded. She sought asylum with the Northern Valley Territory, creating a new identity, claiming her daughter's mate had been one of their own. They accepted her, though they never fully trusted her. And when she died, they kept you on as a companion, I said bitterly. Useful, but never truly part of the pack. Something like anger flashed across the Alpha's scarred face. They knew what you were. They must have. No pureblood wolf would have your scent. I shook my head. Only the previous Alpha and my grandmother's closest friend knew the truth. When they died, the secret mostly died with them. The current leaders might suspect, but as long as I'm useful and unobtrusive, they overlook what's right in front of them. Cowards, he finished, disgust evident in his tone. We reached the top of the ridge, where the view opened up to reveal the vast territories of all 6 packs spread below us. In the center, smoke still rose from parts of the ceremonial grounds, but I could see wolves moving about, rebuilding and tending to the wounded. You still haven't answered my question, I said softly. What do you want from me? The Alpha was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon where his western territories lay. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost some of its habitual hardness. When my father died and I took the throne, I made a promise to myself that I would find Lyra's child. Not to use you as he would have, but to offer you your birthright, a place among your grandmother's people. He turned to me, green eyes gleaming in the moonlight. I've searched for years, sending scouts to all the neighboring territories. And tonight, by pure chance, I found you. Birthright. I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. I have no birthright. I'm half human, and half Western wolf, he countered. With Western blood comes Western strength, even diluted as yours is. I laughed without humor. I'm the weakest wolf in the Northern Valley Territory. I can barely shift, and when I do, my wolf form is pathetic. Because you've been taught to be ashamed of what you are, he said, stepping closer. Because no one has shown you how to embrace both halves of yourself. His proximity was unsettling, his scent, pine and winter wind and something distinctly male, wrapping around me. I forced myself to stand my ground, though every instinct told me to step back from this predator. And you could teach me? I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. Yes, the simple confidence in that single word was staggering. Before I could respond, a howl rose from the direction of the ceremonial grounds, a signal. The Alpha's head turned sharply toward the sound. They're calling a council of territory leaders, he explained, to discuss the attack and the taken females. You should go, I said, suddenly exhausted by revelations and fear, and the weight of a history I hadn't known was mine. He studied me for a moment. Come with me. I blinked in surprise. To a council of alphas? If you say just a companion one more time, I might reconsider my promise not to hurt you, he interrupted, though there was something almost like humor in his eyes. You are Lyra's daughter of the Silver Moon bloodline. You have as much right to be there as any second in command. The other territories won't see it that way, I warned. And if they realize what I am, you'll be under my protection, he said firmly. No one will dare challenge that. The absolute certainty in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it sent a different kind of shiver through me, a reminder of just how powerful he was, how dangerous he could be if crossed. Why would you risk political complications for someone you just met? I asked. Someone who isn't even a pure wolf. For a moment, something raw and honest flickered across his face, so quickly I almost missed it. Because I know what it's like to be judged for what you are rather than who you are. His hand moved unconsciously to the scar that marred his face. Because Lyra was kind to me when others feared me, and because I made her a promise. What promise? I asked softly. That if I ever found her grandchild, I would offer protection, not exploitation. His eyes held mine. I keep my promises, Maya. The way he said my name, with a kind of gentle emphasis, made something flutter in my chest. I pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the practical aspects of his offer. If I go with you to this council, what happens after? You return to the West, and I remain here as Sophia's companion. His expression darkened. Is that what you want? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? I'd never really been asked before. My life had been about survival, about being useful enough to keep, invisible enough to avoid scrutiny. I began, then stopped uncertain. Yes, he prompted. I want to understand who I am, I finally said. What I am. My grandmother died when I was too young to learn everything I needed from her. I've been hiding for so long, I'm not sure I know how to be anything else. Something softened in his green eyes. Then perhaps it's time you stopped hiding. A second howl rose from the ceremonial grounds, more urgent than the first. We should go, he said, offering me his hand. Thunder will carry us back faster. I hesitated, staring at his outstretched hand. Accepting it felt symbolic somehow, like stepping through a doorway I could never recross. I don't even know your name, I realized suddenly. Everyone simply called him Alpha or Leader. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Kai, he said. My name is Kai. Kai. The name suited him somehow, strong and sharp, like a blade forged in mountain fire. I took a deep breath and placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and he led me back toward where Thunder waited. Chapter 5. The Council of Alphas. The ride back to the ceremonial grounds was both faster and more comfortable than our earlier journey. Perhaps it was because I was growing accustomed to Kai's presence behind me, or perhaps it was because I now understood something of his interest in me. Either way, I found myself leaning back against his chest without the earlier tension, allowing his warmth to seep into me as Thunder carried us swiftly through the forest. As we approached the ceremonial grounds, the devastation from the attack became visible. Several buildings had been burned, and wolves in both human and wolf form moved among the wreckage, carrying the wounded and rebuilding what they could. Kai guided Thunder toward the main hall, which had survived mostly intact. Outside, a group of stern-looking men stood in a tight circle. The alphas of the 6 territories, I realized, along with their highest-ranking seconds. As we dismounted, I spotted Sophia standing with a group of females near the hall entrance. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and she immediately broke away, hurrying in our direction. Maya, she called, relief evident in her voice. You're alive. When the rogues attacked, I thought. She stopped abruptly, her gaze shifting to Kai, who stood protectively close behind me. Her expression changed from relief to something more guarded. My alpha is looking for you, she said to him, lowering her eyes respectfully. I'm aware, Kai replied coolly. Maya will be accompanying me to the council. Sophia's eyes snapped to mine, shock evident. But she's just a valued member of my entourage, Kai cut in, his tone brooking no argument. Confusion flashed across Sophia's face, but she was too well trained in pack protocol to question an alpha directly. Instead, she turned to me. Maya, what's happening? Why is he treating you like? she trailed off, unable to find the right words. I opened my mouth, not sure what I was going to say, when Kai's hand settled lightly on the small of my back. "The council is waiting," he reminded me, his voice gentler than I'd heard it before. "I'll explain later," I promised Sophia, though I had no idea how I would explain any of this. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "My father won't like this." "Your father's opinion is not my concern," Kai said dismissively, guiding me away. As we walked toward the group of alphas, I whispered, "You're making enemies for me." "You already had enemies," he replied quietly. "They just didn't see you as important enough to acknowledge before." Before I could respond to this unsettling observation, we reached the circle of territory leaders. Conversation died as they noticed our approach, all eyes fixing first on Kai, then sliding with obvious confusion to me. The Northern Valley Alpha, my alpha technically, stepped forward. Alpha Marcus was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, his once dark hair now shot through with silver. His expression was a careful mask of neutrality, but I could see the question in his eyes as he looked at me. "Alpha Kai," he greeted formally. We were about to begin. "Then it's fortunate we arrived in time," Kai replied smoothly. Alpha Marcus's gaze lingered on me. "Perhaps your attendant would be more comfortable waiting inside with the other females." Kai's hand pressed more firmly against my back. "Maya will stay." A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembled leaders. I caught fragments of whispered questions. "Who is she? Why would he bring a companion? Look how he stands beside her." Alpha Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. "As you wish." He turned to address the full group. "The rogues have taken 8 females. 3 from my territory, 2 from the Eastern Ridge Territory, 1 from the River Valley Territory, 1 from the Mountain Peak Territory, and 1 from the Coastal Territory. None from the Western Mountains," observed one of the other alphas, suspicion clear in his voice. "The Western Territory arrived last and was positioned furthest from where the main attack occurred," Alpha Marcus pointed out, though I could hear the same suspicion underlying his reasonable words. "Are you suggesting my territory had something to do with this attack?" Kai asked, his voice deceptively soft. The temperature of the gathering seemed to drop several degrees. I felt the subtle shift in Kai's stance, a predator preparing to strike if necessary. "No one is suggesting anything," Alpha Marcus said quickly. "We're simply trying to understand what happened and how to respond." Kai nodded, but his posture remained alert. "Continue." "We've tracked the rogues to the Shadowlands," Alpha Marcus said. "They've established a camp there, well defended and difficult to approach without being detected." "We should attack immediately," declared one of the other alphas, a younger man with fierce eyes, who I recognized as the Mountain Peak leader, "before they can move deeper into unclaimed territories." "A direct assault would endanger the captives," countered the River Valley Alpha, an older female with silver-streaked black hair. "We need a more subtle approach." As the leaders debated strategy, I found my attention drawn to a map spread on a table nearby. It showed the territories of all 6 packs with the unclaimed lands, including the Shadowlands, marked in darker ink. Something about the rogue's position nagged at me. Without thinking, I stepped forward to study the map more closely. The conversation halted abruptly, all eyes turning to me. "What is she doing?" someone muttered. I felt Kai move to my side, his presence both reassuring and intimidating. "You've noticed something," he said. Not a question, but a statement. I nodded, suddenly nervous with so many powerful wolves watching me. "The Shadowlands. It borders all 6 territories. If the rogues are establishing a base there, they could launch attacks against any of us. But why take females?" Alpha Marcus finished, his expression thoughtful as he studied the map. "Rogues usually raid for food and supplies. Rogues don't typically operate with the kind of coordination we saw tonight either," Kai pointed out. His hand moved to rest lightly on my shoulder, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the other leaders. "What are you thinking?" he asked me directly. I swallowed hard, gathering my courage. What if they're not rogues at all? What if they're trying to establish a new territory? Silence fell over the group of alphas. Alpha Marcus's eyes narrowed as he studied me with new interest. "A new territory? That hasn't happened in generations. It would explain why they took females," I continued, emboldened by Kai's supportive presence. "And why their attack was so coordinated. They're not just surviving, they're building." "If true, this is worse than random rogue violence," said the Eastern Ridge Alpha, a lean man with sharp features. A new territory establishing itself would threaten all our borders. The girl makes a valid point, Alpha Marcus conceded, though he carefully avoided looking at me directly. But who would lead such an effort? Creating a territory requires an alpha of considerable strength. Draven, Kai said suddenly, his voice carrying a weight of history that made everyone turn to him. It could be Draven. The name clearly meant something to the assembled leaders. I saw recognition and alarm flash across their faces. Draven is dead, the Mountain Peak Alpha said firmly. Your father executed him 20 years ago for treason. A body was never found, Kai countered. And the attack tonight carried hallmarks of his strategies. The diversion, the precise timing, targeting females of breeding age. Alpha Marcus's expression darkened. If Draven lives and is building a territory, we have a serious problem. Who is Draven? I whispered to Kai, the tension around me becoming almost palpable. My father's former second, he replied quietly, before he attempted to seize the Western throne. We need to confirm if it's really him, the River Valley Alpha said, before we commit to any course of action. And how do you suggest we do that? The Mountain Peak Alpha demanded. Send a delegation to ask politely? We need someone who can get close without raising suspicion, Alpha Marcus mused. Someone who might be able to infiltrate their camp. I could go. I found myself saying, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Every head turned toward me, expressions ranging from shock to outrage to confusion. Absolutely not, Kai said immediately, his hand tightening on my shoulder. I turned to face him, sudden determination flooding through me. Think about it. The rogues, or whoever they are, won't see me as a threat. I'm not an obvious wolf. I could approach as a human traveler lost in the woods. It's too dangerous, he insisted, green eyes flashing with something that looked almost like fear. It's actually not a terrible idea, Alpha Marcus said slowly, evaluating me with calculating eyes. Maya has always been different, less wolf in her manner. She could potentially pass as human. I felt Kai stiffen beside me. You know, he said to Alpha Marcus, his voice dangerously soft. You've always known what she is. Alpha Marcus didn't flinch under Kai's glare. We suspected. Her grandmother was vague about certain details, but Maya has served the territory loyally, and we've protected her in return. Protected? Kai's laugh was cold. You've used her, kept her ignorant of her heritage, treated her as less than what she is. This isn't the time for this discussion, the River Valley Alpha interrupted firmly. We have 8 women to rescue, if Maya is willing to help. She's not, Kai stated flatly. I straightened my spine, something new and defiant rising in me. I am. Kai turned to me, genuine surprise in his expression. Maya, all my life I've been tolerated because I'm useful, I said quietly, meeting his gaze. Let me be useful now, in a way only I can be. This isn't about proving your worth, he argued, lowering his voice so only I could hear. Isn't it? I countered. You said I should stop hiding, that I should embrace both sides of what I am. My human half could save those women. Internal conflict played across his scarred face. I promised to protect you. Then help me do this safely, I challenged. But don't stop me from trying. For a long moment, he simply stared at me, something shifting in those green eyes. Then, to my surprise, his lips curved in a reluctant smile. You have your grandmother's stubbornness. He turned back to the waiting alphas. Maya will attempt to gather intelligence, he announced, his authoritative tone making it clear this was non-negotiable. But not alone. I'll have warriors positioned within howling distance. And she goes nowhere near the camp until we have a detailed plan with multiple contingencies. Alpha Marcus nodded, looking both relieved and surprised. Agreed. We should begin preparations immediately. As the leaders broke into smaller groups to discuss strategy, Kai guided me slightly apart. Are you certain about this? He asked, searching my face. You can still change your mind. I shook my head. I've spent my whole life trying to hide what I am. Maybe it's time to use it instead. Something that might have been pride flickered in his expression. Your grandmother would say the same. The weight of his words settled over me like a mantle. For the first time in my life, I felt like I might finally understand who I was meant to be. Chapter 6, The Infiltration. Dawn arrived with a pale, misty light filtering through the trees. I stood at the edge of the Western Territory camp, dressed in simple human clothing provided by one of the female warriors. Loose trousers and a tunic that would allow me to move freely if needed, with my hair pulled back in a practical braid. A small satchel hung at my hip containing various herbs, the mirror for signaling, and the pouch of crimson smoke powder. My grandmother's bracelet remained around my neck, now visible rather than hidden. When Kai had seen me tuck it beneath my collar out of habit, he had gently pulled it back out. "Don't hide it," he'd said quietly. "It's part of who you are." Now, as I prepared to leave, the Western Territory gathered to see me off. They had accepted Kai's interest in me with remarkable equanimity, treating me with a cautious respect that felt foreign after years of being overlooked. Kai approached, his expression grave. He'd spent most of the night in strategy meetings with the other alphas, but somehow still looked commanding and alert. He carried something in his hands, a small knife in a leather sheath. "For emergencies only," he said, handing it to me. "It's silver-edged, effective against our kind if necessary." I took it carefully, noting the elegant engravings on the handle, the same sun and moon pattern as my bracelet. "This is Western work." "It belonged to Lyra," he confirmed. "I had it with me, hoping to return it to her grandchild someday." The weight of the knife felt suddenly significant. Another piece of my heritage I hadn't known existed. I secured it carefully within my boot where it would be hidden but accessible. "Remember," Kai continued, his voice low enough that only I could hear, "your human side is not a weakness here. It's your strength. You can think and move in ways they won't expect from a wolf. Trust those instincts." I nodded, fighting down the fear that threatened to overwhelm my determination. "If it's really Draven, what should I look for to confirm?" His jaw tightened. "Draven has distinctive markings, a tattoo of a raven's wing that covers most of his left arm, and he's missing the tip of his right ear from a fight with my father years ago." I committed these details to memory, then asked the question that had been haunting me since the previous night. What if I can't do this? What if my wolf is too weak or my human side too obvious? Kai's expression softened, and to my shock, he reached out to touch my cheek, a gentle, fleeting contact that sent warmth spiraling through me. "Maya," he said, my name sounding like something precious in his voice. "You've survived for years in a territory that never truly accepted you. You've maintained your strength and dignity in circumstances that would have broken many pure wolves. Don't underestimate yourself." His confidence in me was like a physical force, straightening my spine and lifting my chin. "I won't fail," I promised, as much to myself as to him. His green eyes held mine. "Just come back safely. That's all that matters." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. This powerful alpha, feared throughout all territories, was looking at me with genuine concern, possibly even deeper emotions that I dared not name. "I will," I whispered. Alpha Marcus approached, interrupting the moment. "It's time," he said, his gaze darting between Kai and me with poorly concealed curiosity. "Our scouts report minimal movement in the camp. Most will likely be sleeping after last night's raid." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'm ready. Remember," Alpha Marcus continued, "you're a human herbalist who became lost in the forest while gathering plants. You've been wandering for 3 days and are desperate for help. If questioned about where you came from, say you traveled from the northern human settlement beyond the mountains. And if they detect any hint of wolf in my scent," I asked. "Use the masking paste," he instructed, "but only if absolutely necessary. It burns the skin and will only hide your scent for an hour at most." I patted the small container secured in my satchel, hoping I wouldn't need to use the caustic substance. With final nods to both alphas, I turned and began walking toward the forest path that would lead me to the Shadowlands. I felt Kai's eyes following me until I disappeared among the trees. The journey took nearly 3 hours, following careful directions to approach the rogues' camp from the north, the direction a lost human would most likely come from. As I walked, I gradually shifted my posture and movements, adopting the slightly less fluid gait of a human. I softened my vigilance, allowing my eyes to miss details a wolf would notice, making my footsteps a little heavier than necessary. By the time I caught the first scent of the camp, wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and the distinctive musk of wolves in human form, I had fully embodied my role as a frightened, exhausted human woman. I purposely stepped on a dry branch, creating a loud snap, then called out in a tremulous voice, "Hello? Is anyone there? Please, I need help." Almost immediately, I sensed movement in the underbrush. 2 men emerged from between the trees, their stance and expressions instantly marking them as wolves despite their human form. Both were large and rough-looking, with the wary eyes of predators. "Well, what do we have here?" the taller one said, circling me slowly. "A little human all alone in the big bad woods." I allowed my body to tremble, widening my eyes in what I hoped was convincing fear. "Thank goodness. I've been lost for days. I'm an herbalist from the northern settlement. I was gathering plants and got turned around in the forest." The shorter man leaned in, sniffing near my neck. I flinched away, which wasn't entirely an act. His proximity made my skin crawl. "She smells interesting," he muttered to his companion. My heart rate spiked. Had they already detected my partial wolf scent? I clutched my satchel nervously, ready to reach for the masking paste if needed. "Please," I begged, injecting desperation into my voice. "I just need food, water, and directions back to the road. I have medicines I can trade." I gestured to my satchel. The taller man grinned, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp for a human mouth. "Oh, we'll take you to our camp, little herbalist. Our leader will be very interested to meet you." They flanked me, not quite touching but close enough to prevent escape, and led me deeper into the Shadowlands. As we walked, I took careful note of our surroundings, mapping the path in my mind. I counted at least 4 sentry positions we passed, memorizing their locations for my report. The camp itself was larger than I'd expected. Dozens of makeshift shelters arranged around a central clearing where a large fire pit smoldered. Warriors moved about with purpose, carrying weapons and supplies. This was no disorganized band of rogues. This was indeed a territory in formation. My escorts brought me to a larger shelter constructed of animal hides and fallen logs. "Wait here," the taller one ordered, ducking inside. While he was gone, I scanned the camp as subtly as I could, searching for any sign of the captive females. Near the far edge of the clearing, I spotted a heavily guarded structure. The guards' positioning, facing both outward and inward, suggested they were keeping people in as much as keeping others out. The tall wolf emerged from the shelter. "He'll see you now." Taking a steadying breath, I stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by a small fire. As my eyes adjusted, I made out a figure seated on a crude throne of interwoven branches. "A human herbalist lost in my territory," a smooth, cultured voice observed. "How convenient." As he leaned forward into the firelight, I struggled to maintain my frightened human facade. The man was handsome in a cruel way, with sharp features and a predatory smile. But what confirmed his identity was the distinctive tattoo covering his left arm, a raven's wing in black ink, and the missing tip of his right ear. Draven, Alpha Marcus and Kai had been right. "Please, sir," I began, forcing my voice to quaver. I know what you need," he interrupted, rising from his throne. He was tall and lean, with the coiled readiness of a snake about to strike. "The question is, what do I need from you?" He circled me slowly, much as his warrior had done, but his assessment felt more penetrating, more dangerous. "An herbalist could be useful," he mused, stopping in front of me. "We have injured warriors and other guests who might require attention." "Guests?" I asked cautiously. His dark eyes gleamed with amusement. 8 lovely female wolves who will soon help me build the strongest territory these lands have ever seen, once they accept their new reality. Disgust and anger flared within me, but I carefully masked both emotions. "I'm not sure how I could help with wolves. I only treat humans." "You'd be surprised how similar we can be," Draven replied, his gaze lingering on my face. "There's something about you. Familiar somehow." My heart stuttered. Had he recognized something of Lyra in me? I quickly looked down, feigning intimidation. "I'm nobody important, sir. Just a simple herbalist." He lifted my chin with one finger, forcing me to meet his gaze. "We'll see about that." The contact took every ounce of my willpower not to recoil. His touch felt wrong, invasive and cold where Kai's had been respectful and warm. "In the meantime," he continued, "you will examine our guests. If they die before fulfilling their purpose, it would be inconvenient." This was exactly the opportunity one needed, though the thought of what the captives might have already endured made my stomach clench. "I'll need my medicines," I said, gesturing to my satchel. Draven nodded to one of his warriors. "Search it." I stood perfectly still as rough hands pawed through my herbs and supplies. The mirror and smoke powder remained hidden in a secret compartment I'd sewn into the lining, a precaution Alpha Marcus had insisted upon. "Nothing dangerous," the warrior reported. "Take her to the females," Draven instructed. "Watch her closely." Two guards escorted me across the camp to the structure I'd noticed earlier. Inside, huddled on pallets of straw, were 8 women in varying states of distress. Some bore visible injuries, bruises and cuts, while others simply stared with hollow, shocked eyes. "You have 1 hour," a guard growled, shoving me inside and taking up position by the entrance. I moved immediately to the nearest female, a young woman with blonde hair and a swollen wrist that suggested a painful sprain. As I knelt beside her, I whispered, "I'm from the 6 territories. Help is coming." Her eyes widened, then quickly resumed their vacant stare, smart enough not to react visibly. As I pretended to examine her wrist, I murmured, "When I leave, be ready. Tonight when the moon rises." One by one, I moved among the captives, offering what genuine medical care I could while passing my message in hushed tones. None of them betrayed me with so much as a flicker of expression. When the guard finally returned to escort me out, I had confirmed that all 8 were alive and able to move, though 3 would need assistance. Outside, I found myself brought before Draven once again. "Well," he demanded. "They need better food and clean water," I reported, choosing my words carefully. 3 have injuries that require ongoing treatment. I'd like permission to make poultices for them. Draven studied me, his dark eyes narrowed. "You seem very concerned about wolves for a human." "I'm concerned about all living beings," I replied, thinking quickly. "It's why I became a healer." He smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Admirable. You may make your medicines, but you won't be returning to your settlement. Your skills are too valuable to my new territory." Fear clutched at my heart, but I forced a grateful nod. "Thank you for your protection." He waved a dismissive hand. "Take her to gather whatever plants she needs. Keep her within sight of the camp." A young female warrior stepped forward to escort me. As we walked to the edge of the clearing, I carefully observed the camp's defenses, counting warriors, noting weapon caches. I needed just a few moments alone to use my mirror and signal Kai. "I need birch bark," I told my escort. "It grows on the south side of trees. And moonwort, the small white flowers there." I pointed to a spot just beyond the clearing's edge. The female warrior hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Be quick." As I knelt to gather the plants, I positioned myself so my back was to her and the camp. With movements disguised as searching through undergrowth, I slipped the mirror from my satchel and angled it toward where I knew Kai's warriors would be watching. 3 quick flashes, the signal to confirm Draven's presence. 2 long flashes, captives located alive. 1 circular motion, attack at moonrise. I had just returned the mirror to my satchel when a rough hand grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. Draven stood there, his dark eyes blazing with fury. "Did you really think we wouldn't have sentries in the trees?" he hissed, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. "I knew there was something wrong about you." He leaned in, inhaling deeply near my neck, then recoiled with a snarl. "Wolf," he spat. "But not quite. A half-breed abomination." Terror coursed through me, but alongside it came a surprising surge of defiance. I was done hiding, done being ashamed of what I was. "Better a half-breed than a traitor," I retorted, meeting his gaze without flinching. Rage transformed his face. "You'll regret those words when I'm finished with you." As he dragged me back toward the camp, I managed to reach into my satchel, clutching the pouch of crimson smoke powder. I had failed in my subterfuge, but I could still signal the attack. With one desperate movement, I threw the pouch directly into the central fire pit as we passed. Crimson smoke erupted immediately, billowing upward in a signal that would be visible for miles. Draven's roar of fury was drowned out by a more powerful sound, the combined howl of dozens of wolves converging on the camp from all directions. The last thing I saw before Draven's blow sent me spiraling into darkness was a flash of green eyes and silver fur as Kai in his massive wolf form crashed through the treeline, leading the charge. Chapter 7. The Battle and Rescue. Consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by a throbbing pain in my head and the acrid smell of smoke. I found myself bound to a wooden post in the center of Draven's camp, my wrists tied behind my back with rough rope that bit into my skin. The crimson smoke from my signal had cleared, but chaos reigned around me. The sound of battle was deafening, snarls, howls, and the clash of weapons echoing through the Shadowlands as the combined forces of the 6 territories fought Draven's followers. Through the smoke and confusion, I caught glimpses of massive wolf forms tearing through the camp, their fur matted with blood. Awake at last, Draven's voice cut through the noise. He stood before me, no longer the composed leader from earlier. His clothes were torn, blood streaked his face, and fury burned in his dark eyes. Your friends arrived faster than expected, but it won't matter. I still have what they want. He gestured toward the structure where the female captives were held. Even from here, I could see his warriors had barricaded themselves inside with their prisoners. Let them go, I said, testing my bonds. The rope was tight, but not impossible. You've lost. Your camp is overrun. Draven laughed bitterly. Have I? Watch. He raised a horn to his lips and blew 3 sharp blasts. Immediately, I saw his remaining warriors fall back toward the center of camp, forming a defensive circle around the captive's shelter and my post. They were using the prisoners and me as shields. Through the smoke, a massive silver wolf burst into the clearing, larger than any I'd ever seen. Even in his wolf form, Kai was unmistakable. The same fierce intelligence burned in those green eyes, now focused entirely on me. Blood matted his fur, and a fresh gash ran along his left flank, but he moved with deadly purpose. He began to shift back to human form, the transformation rippling through his powerful frame. Within moments, he stood before us, naked from the waist up, his skin gleaming with sweat and marked with battle wounds. In his hand, he carried a silver blade that caught the firelight. Draven, he called out, his voice carrying across the chaos. It's over. Release the captives and surrender. Kai, Draven replied mockingly. Still playing the noble alpha, I see. But you're in no position to make demands. He drew his own weapon, a wicked curved blade, and pressed it against my throat. One wrong move and your little pet loses her head. The cold steel against my skin made me shiver, but I forced myself to remain still. Around the clearing, I could see other warriors from the 6 territories had emerged from the forest, but they held back, unwilling to risk the captives' lives. What do you want? Kai asked, though his stance remained that of a predator ready to strike. What I've always wanted, Draven snarled. Recognition. Power. The Western throne that should have been mine. His blade pressed harder against my throat, and I felt a thin line of blood trickle down my neck. Your father stole that from me, and now I'll take everything from you. My father defeated you fairly in challenge combat, Kai replied coldly. You lost because you were weak. Rage flashed across Draven's face. Weak. I'll show you weak. He pulled the blade away from my throat, raising it high. Watch as I. His words were cut off as I threw my weight backward, using the post I was tied to as leverage. The impact drove my elbow into his stomach, and he stumbled, gasping. It was the opening Kai needed. He moved with inhuman speed, crossing the distance between us in a heartbeat. His blade met Draven's in a shower of sparks, and they began to circle each other like the predators they were. Maya, I heard a familiar voice call out. Through the chaos, I saw Kane, Kai's second-in-command, fighting his way toward me. Hold still. He reached me just as Kai and Draven's battle intensified. With quick, efficient movements, he cut through my bonds, freeing my hands. Can you fight? He asked urgently. I rubbed my sore wrists, my mind racing. I'm not much of a warrior. Then get to the captives, he ordered, pressing a small knife into my hands. Free them while we handle this. I nodded and began to move toward the barricaded shelter, staying low to avoid the worst of the fighting. Draven's warriors were so focused on the battle raging around Kai that they didn't notice one small figure slipping through the shadows. The entrance to the shelter was guarded by 2 men, but they were watching the main battle, their attention divided. I crept closer, my grandmother's knife now in my hand alongside the one Kane had given me. These weren't ordinary humans I was facing. They were wolves, with enhanced senses and strength. But I had something they didn't expect. The element of surprise and the desperate fury of someone fighting for innocent lives. I struck quickly and silently, using techniques my grandmother had taught me years ago. Not wolf combat, but human fighting methods that relied on speed and precision rather than brute force. The first guard went down with barely a sound, unconscious from a pressure point strike to his neck. The second turned just as I drove my knee into his solar plexus, dropping him to the ground. Inside the shelter, the 8 captive females looked up at me with a mixture of hope and fear. The territories have come for you, I whispered urgently, beginning to cut through their bonds. We need to move quickly. The young blonde woman I'd spoken to earlier. Arya, I learned, helped me free the others. There are more guards outside, she warned. Not anymore, I replied grimly. Can everyone walk? 3 of the women were injured, but with support from the others, they could move. I led them toward the back of the shelter, where a small opening led into the forest. Follow this path, I instructed, pointing toward a route that would take them away from the fighting. Territory warriors are positioned throughout the woods. Call out, they'll find you. What about you? Arya asked. I glanced back toward the center of camp, where Kai and Draven's battle continued to rage. I have to help end this. The women disappeared into the forest just as a tremendous crash shook the ground. I turned to see that Kai and Draven had fought their way toward the large fire pit at the center of camp. Both men were bleeding from multiple wounds, their clothes torn and their faces masks of deadly concentration. Draven was skilled, I had to admit. His blade work was fluid and vicious, and he fought with the desperate fury of a man with nothing left to lose. But Kai was something else entirely, a force of nature shaped by years of leadership and battle. Their blades locked, and for a moment they stood frozen, muscles straining against each other. Then Draven did something unexpected. He shifted partially, allowing his wolf strength to flow into his human form while maintaining his ability to wield the blade. It was a dangerous technique, one that could tear a person apart if not perfectly controlled. But it gave him the extra power he needed to break Kai's guard and send him stumbling backward. Now you die, Draven snarled, raising his blade for a killing blow. Without thinking, I acted on pure instinct. My grandmother's knife left my hand in a perfect arc, spinning through the air to bury itself in Draven's shoulder. The impact spun him around, disrupting his attack and giving Kai the opening he needed. Kai's blade found its mark, sliding between Draven's ribs to pierce his heart. The traitor's eyes went wide with shock, then slowly glazed over as he collapsed to the ground. The sudden silence was deafening. Around the camp, the remaining rogues threw down their weapons, seeing their leader fall. The battle was over. Kai pulled his blade free and turned to me, his green eyes wide with a mixture of relief and something deeper. Maya, he breathed, crossing to me in quick strides. Are you hurt? I shook my head, suddenly feeling shaky now that the adrenaline was wearing off. The captives are safe. I freed them. His hands found my face, tilting it up so he could examine the thin cut on my throat where Draven's blade had pressed. When I saw him with that knife at your neck, he said quietly, I thought I might lose you before I'd even found you. The intensity in his voice made my heart skip. Kai. Before I could finish, he pulled me against him, his arms encircling me in an embrace that felt like coming home. I could feel his heart pounding against my chest, matching the rapid rhythm of my own. You were magnificent, he murmured against my hair. Brave and clever, and everything I hoped you could be. I pulled back slightly to look at him. What happens now? His thumb traced the line of my cheek, gentle despite the calluses from years of sword work. Now you get to choose your own path for the first time in your life. And if I choose to go with you? To the Western Territories. Something like wonder crossed his face. Then I'll spend every day proving that you made the right choice. Around us, the other territory leaders were approaching, their expressions a mixture of respect and curiosity as they looked at me. I had helped save their people, proven myself in battle, and established my worth in a way that had nothing to do with bloodlines or politics. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. Not because I was useful or tolerated, but because I had found my place in the world. And perhaps, if the look in Kai's eyes was any indication, I had found something even more precious. A mate who saw me not as half of anything, but as whole. The end.